4020.
Richards, I think Warrington were less than 1/10 as disappointing as England's women. Well, let's talk about England's women, because it amazes me, because the amount of things I've read in the last few days by people who have never seen England play before, obviously, or never seen the Jillaroos play before, or probably even seen a women's rugby league game before, but are now massive experts. And I'm not an expert, I just have to say this, but how many months ago did I say Australia would win by 50 to 60 points? We were never going to win that game.
No,
England were never going to win that game. And was it 2002? Great Britain were beaten by Australia 60-odd points in Sydney. When did we last time win a series? The Tri-Nations, a World Cup? 75? 73?
1970.
England's cricket team got beaten by Afghanistan the other week, so I believe they're disbanding now. England's women cricket team, they disbanded months ago. The Welsh Rugby Union team, they don't exist, because they've lost 15 in a row and they've got loads of money behind them. The result was disappointing, but the performance was wholly predictable from anyone who's seen anything, because the Australians, they're bloody good. They're very, very good, and I'm not saying England shouldn't have lost by 90 points, but let's start here. The Jillaroos, they're quite good, as you said.
They did win a World Cup final by 50 points.
Against the second best team in the world.
Yeah. I think the worry for those that looked at the respective world rankings of the teams before the game kicked off is there is a huge gap between first and third. By the same token, there's a huge gap between third and fourth and fifth. So that is the development of the women's game. I think the salutary lesson, which we didn't need telling because we know, but was exposed, is that when the NRLW set up, they had 4 teams. They focused solely on elite. There were a lot of teams that wanted to join them, and they said no, until we are strong enough to spread the word and that the people coming in are at a level that the ones that are already there, we're not expanding. And even if that means we'll have 6-game season and it won't be over 2 months, that's what we're going to have. We're only going to have 1 state of origin game to start. We could have begun with 3, but we want it to be the best of the best. And what we've done is, when we started in 2018, we had 4 good teams. We are now in 2025 and we've still got 4 good teams, but our Super League is made up of 8 teams. So I think we've tried to
run before we can walk.
Yes, and that, which I think Stuart Barrow alluded to in his press conference, which is brave because he works for the RFL, is the fact that that's behind part of the reason why our top players don't play at a level of intensity week in, week out to match the Aussies. And then you add into the fact that our girls are paid expenses in the top clubs. They're not paid a living wage, and the Aussies are paid to be almost professional. They're very nearly at the point where they could make a living out of just being rugby league players, and our players that have gone over there they're professional rugby players. Well, that's not a million miles away from West Warriors playing Leeds Rhinos in the Challenge Cup. And the score was 92-0. So I think it exposed what we already knew, but it didn't tell us something we didn't know.
No, it's apples and oranges, isn't it? You're comparing apples with oranges. It's just not. They were never going to be in competition. I didn't think it'd be quite as big a scoreline as that, but it was always going to be difficult for them, and I think it will actually do the players good, because you can build up a false impression of yourselves if you don't test yourself against the best team in the world, and that is a harsh lesson, isn't it?
But I also think as well, if we're talking about NRL investment, and again listening to Peter V'landys and trying to read between the lines of some of the things that he says, because they're not going to come out and tell you everything, nor should they. He is a passionate advocate for the women's game. He wanted that game. He was concerned before the kick-off that it wouldn't be a spectacle. But he's already said, even though we're going to 3 games, I'm not automatically ditching the women's game. We might have to change what. If you're the NRL and you want to invest in something over here, become a shareholder in something, I'd now be insisting that a fair proportion of that money went into the women's game, because that's low-hanging fruit. And there is so much interest in women's sport at the moment. So what do you need to close that gap?
The difficulty with the sport here in the UK is we've already got finite resources for the men's elite game. Never mind trying to develop a women's game.
But that's why I think the NRL coming in, that has to be ring fenced to say, right, well, we don't just want the men to be more competitive. If we're staging a World Cup in 2026, we don't want Australia just to turn up for the final and walk off with the trophy.
Yeah.
We want it to be competitive. And if there's going to be another World Cup a couple of years later now, because we're splitting them up, we want to help the women's game. Now, it may well be that we'll come to you and say you shouldn't have 8 teams in Super League, and the best players from some of the other teams now need to move into those who are strong. You can't alter the fact that, you know, Castleford became York, that it's the same 4 teams that are strong. But it's true, isn't it?
There's only a finite number of players that
Exactly.
can fit in the elite competition.
And Stuart Barrow said, you know, the top players only need to play 1 week in 4. You can't have that.
It's not the fault of the players that they aren't good enough, because that's just what we're playing with. It's like when people say, we need better referees. Well, where are they going to come from? They don't exist yet, but they might do in the future.
Which raises 2 other questions. One is we want more of our players to play in the NRLW, which is starting to happen, so they clearly recognise we have some talent. The other thing is, Stuart Barrow was talking about using heritage players who play in the NRLW. Bring it on if that's going to close the gap.
The concern as well is, as we've seen in the Pacific Championships, Tonga are getting stronger.
Yep.
Samoa are getting stronger.
Because
Fiji
all of
are getting
their players
stronger.
are playing in
Papua
the
New Guinea are getting stronger.
NRLW.
So we're third at the moment, but
they don't get a run out in the NRLW unless they're bloody good.
Yeah.
So what do we do? I don't know. But well, the first thing is I think we've suggested it before. It's interesting because the Wheelchair Super League's expanded, but when you listen to people talk about that, it gives coaches of the top teams a chance to rest their players, which is a different thing in the Wheelchair Super League, and give fringe players a chance. Now, whether in 3 years' time we come back and say, well, the gap between us and France, it was like this, but now it's got bigger, we don't know. It should only be a 4-team competition, because there are only 4 teams.
And maybe if that's one thing that comes out of it.
Is that a shame for Huddersfield? And Huddersfield, who, remember, we've gone professional. No, you haven't.
I don't think you're excluding them. You're just saying there is a benchmark standard. If you can match that standard in terms of your investment and your playing strength and your junior development, you'll be welcomed in. But it'll be phased in. It's not like we're going to have automatic promotion relegation, or we're going to have an opportunity where a team coming up from the Championship is going to, and that team isn't ready to be in Super League.
Tony's mentioned no funding, and there is, as we say, there's no money, so we're hamstrung by that point. But he also says there's only three games on Sky a season, and every NRLW game is on TV, isn't it? It's part of the deal. But we're not streaming the games. The clubs aren't streaming the games. So if I want to watch St Helens versus Huddersfield, I'm not going to go to St Helens because I know what the result's going to be. Huddersfield, let me use a different example. Wigan versus Leigh. I'm not going to go to Wigan because I know what the result's going to be. But I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the game. I can't.
It's all about preparation. The Aussies looked to have a slightly different body shape now. The Aussie women. They are athletes in the sense of you can tell that when they're in training, they are full time, and we are getting there through incredible efforts by our players. But you can't expect ones who train 2-3 times a week or go to the gym on their own and try and keep up to be at the same level. I
went back and looked at the game from 2019, which I commentated on. And you can see the difference in this. You can't talk about this thing. We can't talk about body shape and size and this and that and the other and fitness level. I mean, I can't talk about fitness levels. Kind of Jesus Christ. But you can see there is a difference in a team from 2019 who may or may not have got to the grand final last year, and that same team last year. You can see how things have changed. So there is progression.
Absolutely.
It just happens to be that the Australians have.
They've gone so much.
Yeah, but you were saying that in the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, which is only 2.5 years ago, England played in a magnificent game against New Zealand in the semi-final. Mm-hmm. The Aussie and the Jillaroos and New Zealand group game was probably the best game of women's rugby league we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And the New Zealanders had to play a third game at the end of that week, which was the World Cup final. And they weren't at that level. No. But clearly, we were competitive in that World Cup to the best we could have hoped to be. And just because we've lost one game,
it's like everything.
6 months later, or two and a bit years later, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No. Someone said something interesting to me the other day, which was we should have a team in the NRLW, kind of like the Dr. Kukash British Bulldogs, but with an actual point to it. I don't think there's I don't think that can happen. But
we need more of our players to play in it. The England men's team, when you think now 10 players probably of the 17 are going to be playing in the NRL, we're suddenly looking like, we're really looking forward to this Ashes series because we've now got something we can measure against them. Mm-hmm. We've beaten Samoa, we've beaten Tonga, we've done it quite convincingly. We need to test ourselves. But also we'll be going to these test matches thinking we've got a chance. And that's what you've got to get to. But it's happened because Herbie Farnworth isn't playing with Hull. No disrespect to Hull. He's playing with the Dolphins at the highest level. And just to get his place in the team every week,
where Morgan Knowles will be,
he's got to do it. Is that Wales as Morgan Knowles?
Wales is Morgan Knowles. But it happened, and it was perfect. It was perfect for everyone who wants to dismiss women's rugby league and hates the fact that women can pick up a ball and get out of kitchens and stuff, because it reinforced everything they wanted to think, which is a shame.
But if you are not a rugby league person and you watch that as a neutral and you've not seen women's contact sport before and you've not seen the level of skill that the Aussies have got, it was also an eye-opener.
Tamika Upton, Taryn Aitken, all these players they didn't take their full squad because they knew they were going to win.
Yeah, and I think that don't read too much into the score. Look at some of the reasons behind it and what you're going to do to rectify it. The likelihood is if there's a women's game in Vegas next year, it will be Australia, New Zealand,
or the Origin or something.
I don't think it'd be Origin's too parochial.
Yeah. You've
got to get fans there that
will buy into
it. And I think, again, you
plenty of New Zealanders out.
You don't have
to take the wars out there.
Plus if you told, it's got to be an international, I think.
Yeah. So that was Vegas. That's 45 minutes of Vegas. So well done to us on that. There's nothing else to mention about Vegas, is there?
I think however you look at it, it was a resounding success. It's what you do with it now.
Iron sharpens iron, says Gav, but we've got plastic cutlery. Well, now the ball is in the court of the Rugby Football League. The England head coach has come out and said what needs to be done, and we'll see. When are the group games of the Challenge Cup being played, by the way?